My name is Helen, and I'm 68 years old. About 6 months ago, my only son, who is now 35, got married. After losing my husband, I raised him single-handedly, and now I finally feel a weight has been lifted from my shoulders. Honestly, I feel relieved to have passed the baton to his wife. Having decided to take it easy, I quit my job 3 months ago, so now I'm living on my pension.
You can't do that, Helen. Many people age rapidly once they retire.
The woman who took over the management of my lunch spot, Mary, says this as she nibbles on the homemade cookies she brought along. She's slightly older than my son, practically of an age to be my daughter, and she's been working at my shop since her high school days and is a veteran with over 20 years of experience.
I'll take over the shop if you're going to close it,
Mary said, so I happily left it in her hands. It was a shop beloved by the locals for its cheap and tasty homemade-style lunch, and I would have been sad to close it. I knew she would perfectly continue the flavors.
Helen, you're not getting off so easily. Please help me think of a new menu for the fall,
she said, spreading a thick recipe notebook on the table. Truthfully, I'm glad to be relied upon.
Is your son getting along well in his married life?
Since we've known each other for 2 decades, she naturally knows my son. I had hoped the two of them would get together, but unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Well, I don't want to be a meddlesome mother-in-law, so I'm mostly hands-off.
I handed over the 2-bedroom apartment where my son and I had lived to my son and his wife, and now I'm living alone in a studio apartment. My son's wife, Emily, is 32, 3 years younger than my son. They met through a mutual acquaintance and started dating. Not long after our first meeting, Emily mentioned,
"This apartment is owned by you, isn't it, Helen? Isn't it a bit cramped for 3 people?" "Yes, it's quite old. Maybe you could rent an apartment nearby,"
I suggested.
"But wouldn't it be financially secure for you to live alone and save on rent?"
Emily countered. I married late, and my husband was 10 years older, so we thought we wouldn't have children. My husband was always a bachelor at heart, and the apartment we bought before marriage was just right for 2 people. We lived comfortably together and unexpectedly had a son. We were amazed at how adorable our child was. My husband, thinking about providing for our son, even in his 60s and 70s, was lost in a traffic accident. It happened just when our son was entering junior high school. My husband had thought ahead and had life insurance. Since the accident was entirely not his fault, we received a considerable amount of money, including damages. Considering that I had to live with my son from now on, I decided to start a small lunch shop, leveraging my best skill, cooking. The apartment filled with memories of my late husband is indeed, as Emily said, financially secure for me to rent a studio than for them to rent a whole apartment. After Emily left, I told my son. She's quite straightforward. Then my son says,
"Yeah, she is. I'm not really good at reading between the lines, so I like that about her."
My son said with a smile. If he's happy with her, I have no objections. Even though the couple cleverly landed a rent-free place, my son offered to pay for my new apartment's rent and help with the move in full. He told me, "Thank you. But don't worry about me. I'm sure you two will have plenty of things you need too. I'll ask you for help with moving, though." Despite what I said, I still felt a lingering unease after meeting Emily, whom I had just met that day. One day, I got a call from my son.
"Hey, Mom. Want to come over for dinner sometime soon?"
My son and his wife had invited me. Although I was delighted with the invitation, the discussion that followed left me wringing my hands. Actually, Emily's cooking is. According to my son, who seemed to struggle to get the words out, Emily's cooking is apparently downright unpalatable. Apparently, she doesn't really enjoy cooking. She often resorts to deli food from the supermarket or frozen meals, which, according to my son, is much better than the dishes she makes. At first, my son tried to make various suggestions, like, "I want to eat this, it would be better if you did this," and, "Should I cook?" But every time, Emily would become extremely grumpy.
"We used to always have cereal and fruits for breakfast, right? Emily wants energy bars. When I said I wanted to eat fruits for breakfast, she got upset. When I then said, at least let's have cereal, she got even more upset, and the next morning, she silently served Creole without milk." I was at a loss for words hearing my son's lament. Dietary habits and preferences can be tricky. It might be one of the first obstacles a newly married couple encounters. Either way, since my son brought this up, it left me with a headache. "So, when you come over for dinner, could you subtly teach Emily about cooking?"
I wasn't thrilled about the proposal. One evening, I was invited over to my son and his wife's place. Seeing my son after several months, I was shocked. He had lost a considerable amount of weight. The situation might be more serious than I thought. Being married for just over half a year, my son must have tried his best to improve their eating habits. His call to me was a distress signal. Their apartment had been remodeled since I lived there, and it felt oddly different.
"Welcome, my mother-in-law."
Emily greeted me cheerfully. When I handed her the cherries I had brought as a gift, she was delighted and told me, "Please sit and wait. I'll prepare the meal right away." She gave off the impression of a perfect wife. When I saw the dinner menu laid out on the table, I broke into a cold sweat. Fish fries, which are from supermarket deli food. Steaks seemed homemade, but slightly undercooked. Salad from a supermarket. Soup with onion and bacon. Pickles from a supermarket deli. I couldn't understand how, when inviting your mother-in-law over for dinner, the majority of the food could be supermarket deli items. To begin with, this menu is too heavy for a person nearing their 70s. The fish fries, if warmed in an oven with a baking sheet, would come out crispy. But she had heated it in the microwave, so it was soggy. The steaks were predictably undercooked in the center, and the soup had so much granulated soup stock that it was overpoweringly salty. I gently offered advice like,
"If you do it this way, it will be much tastier."
But she just became more upset.
"You might want to grill the steaks a bit more. Raw meat could potentially cause food poisoning."
When I made that comment, Emily quickly gathered up the dishes as if to snatch them away and reheated the steaks over high heat. She burnt them black and slammed the plate back down as if to say,
"You can't complain now, can you?"
"Oh, would you like some of my pickling jars and the syrup?" I said, thinking I was being helpful, but it seemed to touch a nerve with her.
"I bought these pickles especially for your son because I know he loves them. I can't stand them and I don't even want to touch them. And you're asking me to take care for the stinky pickling syrup every day?"
I guess making pickles might be a tough task for someone who doesn't like them.
"And you used to feed him packed lunches all the time, didn't you? It's no different from supermarket food, is it?"
The truth seemed to be getting sidetracked. Yes, I had fed him lunches from the store I ran, but it was no different from my homemade cooking.
"They weren't supermarket lunches, they were homemade lunches from the store my mother run herself. I made sure to clarify that, didn't I?"
My son had to explain hastily.
"So that's how it is, you're siding with your mother. Fine then. If you don't want to eat, don't."
With a shout, she stormed off to the bedroom, leaving my son and I to sigh and stare at the untouched food on the table.
"I'm sorry. I upset Emily."
When I apologized, my son said,
"Am I being too picky? But it's hard when it's every day. I'm really at my limit."
He said this with a face half covered in tears. What should I have done? At any rate, it didn't look like my son's eating habits were going to improve. It was worrying, but I was unsure how much I should intervene. A few days later, Emily unexpectedly visited my apartment.
"I'm sorry about the other day."
I was relieved to hear her apology, as I had thought she thoroughly disliked me. I served some of my best tea and biscuits, hoping to build rapport with my daughter-in-law.
"So, I hear you're wealthy, Helen."
Emily's comment took me by surprise. I don't know what she heard from my son, but it's true that I have savings. It's money left by my late husband and what I've been saving bit by bit from running the lunch store.
"I want to try for a baby. Can you help us out a bit, Helen?"
She was 32. I understand her feelings well, as it's a critical age for women. I couldn't refuse when she asked for help. I took out $5,000 from my savings and handed it to her.
"I know it's tough, but hang in there as a couple. I was 33 when I had my son, so I understand how you feel."
When I said this, Emily grumbled.
"Please don't pressure me just because you gave me money."
She said that to me. I didn't quite understand why she was upset.
"I've heard it's hard for mothers-in-law and daughters-in-law to get along, and it seems it's really true. I'm active on social media, and a lot of people are criticizing you, you know."
Emily showed me her phone's screen. This probably happened during our dinner conversation the other day. There were numerous comments supporting her while vilifying me with foul language. I was shocked, but from a glance at the posts, I could tell that Emily had twisted the situation to make herself out as the victim.
"Mother and daughter-in-law not getting along, huh?"
I don't think it should be like that, but I'm starting to lose confidence that Emily and I can get along in the future. After a while, I called my son to talk about Emily's fertility treatments, and his reaction was surprising.
"I don't think she's doing anything like that. She doesn't like kids, and it's not like I'm insisting on having them."
I had given her money because she said she needed it for fertility treatments. My son was very surprised to hear this. My son cleared up her misunderstanding and explained to her that I used the money my husband left me to start a small lunch shop, which had become quite popular locally. Emily seemed interested when she heard this and kept asking about my savings. "Oh wow, she is so rich!" Despite his confusion, my son responded,
Well, maybe she has about $1 million? I'm sorry, I think I said something I shouldn't have. I'll check up on the fertility treatment thing,
he said, and hung up. I felt uneasy as days passed without hearing back from him. Then another shocking thing happened. I received a charge on my credit card that I didn't recognize. I don't usually use my card. So I hurriedly checked. I found that my card was missing from my wallet. If I had lost my wallet, that would be one thing, but it's hard to believe that a card I rarely use would just fall out of it. What confirmed my suspicions even more was that the items purchased with that card were high-end branded bags and wallets. Emily must have secretly taken the card from my wallet the last time she visited. Not only did she deceive me into giving her $5,000 under the pretense of fertility treatments, but she also stole my card. This is a bigger problem than just her terrible cooking. I contacted the credit card company to freeze the card. Although family members who misuse a card are not usually held accountable, I couldn't let her keep spending my money. Did knowing I had savings blind her to reason? Originally, she probably wasn't after my property. I was kind of sad, but I couldn't just stay quiet. I was fed up with her cooking, so I reached out to my son in advance. "Why don't you try my homemade cooking once in a while?" When I suggested this, my son seemed more than happy.
Emily might be upset again, but is that okay?
When I asked him, he replied in a resigned tone.
Yeah, I'm kinda at my limit too. I'm ready for whatever happens.
The day, I brought all the ingredients to my son's apartment that day and prepared the meal in the kitchen I once knew so well. Emily stayed in the bedroom and didn't help me at all. She was probably writing nasty comments about me on social media again.
Ah, delicious. This is it. You would understand if you tried it.
My son was delighted to eat my cooking, so much so that one might think he was overdoing it. After all, I had only cooked his favorite dishes. However, after taking a sip of my soup, Emily frowned.
Isn't this soup a bit bland?
That's because you add too much granulated stock. The problem isn't the stock itself, but rather the quantity. I replied with a stern tone. Predictably, she stubbornly retorted.
But it tastes better with more.
Even supermarket ready-made food tastes different with a bit of extra effort. It's a lifesaver for busy homemakers. I've been selling boxed lunches for busy people all my life. But you're not working, Emily, so you have plenty of time to cook, don't you? I asked. Caught off guard, she fell silent for a moment, then snapped.
I can't make these bland, old people's meals.
She spat out her words with contempt. Even my son seemed to lose his temper at this. Or rather, he'd probably been fed up for quite a while.
If you say you can't make it, then fine. You probably didn't even want to cook in the first place, did you? This grilled fish, the stuffed bell peppers, the soup, the pickles. They all taste 100 times better than your cooking.
Emily, getting an earful from my son, angrily stood up and shouted.
Oh, I can't take it anymore. If I knew you were such a mama's boy, I wouldn't have married you.
Does a son praising his mother's cooking make him a mama's boy? I stopped Emily as she grabbed her bag and stormed out of the room. Wait a minute. That bag, it's the new product from that brand, isn't it? She flinched for a moment, then replied. Huh? Yes, what about it? She seemed determined to play innocent. You see, I got a bill for a bag from that brand, purchased with my card. I had no idea, so I thought it was strange. I confronted her directly, but she didn't flinch. Huh?
Helen, maybe you forgot about your own shopping? It happens when you get older.
Ignoring my point, she tried to blame it on my cognitive abilities. My son, who had been silent without understanding the situation, interjected. Hey, didn't you buy a wallet along with that bag?
Yes, the charge from the credit company included both the bag and the wallet. It came to a total of $3,000. Hey, why does the bill for your shopping go to my mom? She stole my card from my purse.
Upon my revelation, my son slumped his shoulders in dismay.
You stole her card? What were you thinking? That's criminal behavior, even if we're family.
Even as she was berated by my son, she showed no remorse and shrugged.
Oh, come on, I didn't steal it. I just borrowed it. Helen has enough with her pension, right? Money isn't something you can take with you when you die, so it's better to spend it.
Her words were no excuse at all, but she didn't seem to think she'd done anything wrong.
So, you even lied about wanting to have a baby to squeeze money out of my mom? I wasn't lying. I really did intend to. But it seemed like such a big deal. And it seemed like it would be tough on you too, so I thought you might not want to.
Her words were as if she had given up thinking about my son's sake.
I wasn't informed of anything.
It seemed my son had also realized that talking with her was futile. I didn't care whether my son and Emily had children. As long as my son could live happily with Emily, that would be enough. But it seemed that was an impossible wish.
It may be enough for me to live on my pension. Indeed, I do have savings.
As I began, Emily's eyes brightened as if she thought her point had been proven. Huh? I told you so, didn't I? I overrode Emily's attempt to interrupt.
That money isn't for me. It's for my son and his family. I don't recognize you as family. It's not your money to spend.
Her face turned from red to blue, then she retorted.
What are you talking about? I'm your son's wife, aren't I? Aren't we family?
And she pouted. I couldn't believe she had the nerve to say that. My son slowly began to speak.
I don't want to be married to you anymore. Let's get a divorce.
At the moment she heard these words, she lost her temper and started screaming.
Are you out of your mind? Why are we suddenly talking about divorce? This isn't sudden. I've been thinking about it for months. It's not your fault you're not good at cooking. But you never tried to make an effort, did you?
My son must have been really frustrated with his wife's cooking, but you can't get divorced just because someone isn't a good cook.
Do you have any evidence that I haven't made any effort?
She argued like a school kid. Finally, I couldn't stay quiet any longer.
Look, cooking is about considering the person who's going to eat it. It's not about being good or bad at it. There are recipes that anyone can follow to cook a dish. You never even asked me once what your husband's favorite meal is, did you? Also, maybe being bad at cooking isn't a reason for divorce, but the fact that you lied to me to extort money, and that you stole cards to go shopping, are crimes, right? Those are valid reasons for divorce.
If my son wants a divorce, I will support him.
What's the matter with you two? Like mother, like son.
His wife burst into a rage and started throwing around unpleasant words, but my son coldly pushed her away, saying,
I don't want to dislike you any more than I already do. Can you please be quiet?
My son coldly shut her down, and then it finally went quiet.
If you don't want a divorce, go ahead and seek mediation or take it to court. I don't think you'll win though. If you agree to part ways amicably, I'll give you that designer handbag and wallet. I'll repay the money my mom lost due to your fertility treatment scam as well.
My son seemed determined. I didn't really need him to repay me, but I decided to keep silent about it.
What? A scam? How awful that sounds. You think you can pay me off with just this? You must be joking.
She tried to argue further.
All right. In that case, I'm going to charge everything to you. Wait for it.
Upon hearing my son's parting words, it seemed that she finally realized her disadvantage. After a while, Emily, who took over my shop, came by with her recipe notebook. She wanted to consult about the Christmas menu. When I told her about the struggle with my daughter-in-law, she said sympathetically,
That must have been tough.
My son's divorce was finalized, and his ex-wife packed her belongings and left. In the end, I returned to my old apartment and once again began living with my son. The acquaintance who introduced my former daughter-in-law, perhaps feeling guilty, informed my son about her subsequent life. The fact that she couldn't cook at all, her criminal behavior and constant verbal abuse towards me, were becoming well known, and she seemed to have lost all her friends. Well, not just this time, but I feel, rather late in the game, that her character was problematic to begin with. It seems she's actively trying to get remarried, but maybe her gold-digging intentions are too transparent, as she can't seem to make any romantic connections. I can only hope there won't be any more victims like us. But it might be tough for a daughter-in-law if the mother-in-law is a good cook. Food habits can be very different depending on the region. It's a tricky issue, isn't it? Emily made a poignant remark.
That's true. If you were my daughter-in-law, things wouldn't have turned out like this. After all, you can perfectly replicate my cooking.
When I casually said that, she blushed and replied, Please stop! Don't tease a nearly 40-year-old single woman like that. My son, who was drinking coffee next to us, said,
Mary is not an old lady. You were actually my crush when I was in high school. I thought you were awesome for being beautiful and a great cook.
And turned red, creating a strange atmosphere.
What? You should have told me that at the time.
Well, you treated me like a kid since I was younger and in high school. Watching the two of them joking around, I started to think, could this possibly lead to something more? If these three of us could become a family, it would surely work out well. If that's the case, we'd need a bigger kitchen. While thinking about this, I couldn't help but smile. To capture a man's heart, you start with his stomach. Maybe that old saying has some truth to it.